talked about. The second imperative that actually goes along with the third one is to identify, define, locate, and facilitate opportunities for all Guyanese. And those opportunities, of course, arising from this oil and gas development. Then local content. Well, what is that? Okay. So local content, it's well, let me put it this way. I believe it was in October of last year, ExxonMobil announced that they have done the final approval of their investment for the third development, the Payara project. And the amount of that investment is $9 billion US. $9 billion. So the question is, of that $9 billion investment, that $9 billion spend, how much of that spend remains in Guyana? That's really the question, and that's why local content is important. That's why it's really very critical. So local content has three components. If you want to think of it as, number one, employment of locals. So you have all this development occurring in Guyana. How many local people are going to be employed? So that's number one. Number two is capacity building. Capacity to do what? Now, capacity to perform. And that's capacity to perform on an individual level, people performing in jobs. And you get that through education, training, and skills development. Then the other part of that would be capacity building for local industry. How do they get that? This oil and gas business is all new to Guyana, so it really doesn't exist in Guyana. There's no competence, period. And how do you get there? You get there by having local industry participate with all the foreign companies that come in at some level, be it very small. That way, they can start developing those competencies. So those are the first two parts of local content. The third part is local industry participation. So there's a gap between what is needed and what we have in Guyana. But some of that gap can be filled by the people in the diaspora. The skills you have in business, it's in finance, in engineering, computers, technology, all these fields I know Guyanese occupy all over the world. And so it's a matter of, number one, those of us in the diaspora who would like to make a difference to actually go back and do that. But number two, which is very important, the government has to be very deliberate in engaging the diaspora in a very meaningful way and making it possible to repatriate those skills and resources. Another imperative that's really very important, and it's touched on a bit in the earlier panel by Dennis, is health, safety, and environmental. Yes, Guyana is pristine, but we're already seeing some issues with the development arising from the oil and gas opportunity in Guyana. And health, safety, and environmental has to be really at the very forefront, because the oil and gas resources are not going to last forever. Not even considering what some are talking about, the phasing out of petroleum, which personally I don't believe that's going to happen. But being that as it may, the health, safety, and environment has to be protected. And in order to get there, we have to update the laws in Guyana, make them more robust, and enforce the laws and the regulations. That's the only way that you're going to maintain some semblance of the environment that you currently have there. There are so many examples from all around the world, Nigeria, Indonesia, wherever. There's been tremendous degradation in the environment, destruction of species, destruction of the land, pollution, all that. One other thing I'd like to talk about in a little bit of detail, actually, has to do with the rule of law and transparency. And I think this is important for those of us in the diaspora who are thinking of going back to Guyana and doing business there. There's something known as the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or FCPA. Some of you who are in business, I'm sure you've heard about it before. And it's something that you have to be aware of if you're as either an American citizen or an American resident, permanent resident, whatever status you have, doing business in any foreign country. That law was put in place, I believe, in 1977 to combat massive bribery that was occurring, especially in extractive industries, but elsewhere, doing business around the world. And it has two components to it. One component has to do with the bribery, and the other has to do with accounting practices, which can be related because if you have shady accounting practices to hide how you're passing the money, then they go hand in hand. And we have two agencies that deal with that. You have the SEC and you have the DOJ. The penalties for being caught and convicted of FCPA violations can be very severe. You lose all your profits that you earned, and you can also go to prison. So it's something that people need to be aware of. So anything of value that a US-based business or person offers to an official or someone who is connected in some way, let's call them a PEP, politically exposed person. Anything of value that's offered, that thing of value will get you into trouble because you're seeking an unfair advantage. It could be, for instance, there's a permit that's required to do A, B, and C. And you might have given some money. It doesn't matter how much it is. It could be $5,000, it could be $5 million, or it could be $1,000. You give that to somebody to, grease the skids and get it done for you. Well, you got an unfair advantage by offering a thing of value or giving a thing of value, and that can land you in real hot water. Now, there's no requirement of materiality, which means that you do not have to actually give the thing, right? That thing could be money, or like I said, it could be something else. You don't actually have to give it. It's just the offer. That's enough. And it doesn't matter where in the world you are either. You could be in the United States, you could be in Guyana, or you could be in Timbuktu. They'll get you because your jurisdiction is such that the United States can go after you anywhere. I know someone who, I won't mention his name, different country, that was accused of FCPA violation. And so he went to his bank one day in the country where he was, and he couldn't get into his account. There was no money, he had no access. The accounts were frozen. And so he went through literal hell, being investigated by the FBI and everybody else until he was cleared. So this is a very serious thing, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. It might be happening now in Guyana, who knows? I don't know, but It just takes a complaint from someone, and that person would find himself in a very serious place. Well, I think we can open up things for questions now. And as you ask the questions, we can get into whatever it is that you want to know.
That particular aspect of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and how we could be in hot water by not paying attention to that, that is really, really critical. The other aspect of diasporans getting involved in Guyana, those of you who are U.S. citizens, those of us who are U.S. citizens, and if you're over a certain age and collecting Social Security, you have to look at the Social Security laws of your living and working in Guyana, okay, or overseas, wherever it is. But there is on the website of the Social Security Administration a booklet that will give you all of the information you need to know, you need to have about Social Security and living abroad, working abroad. So those two things, as far as U.S. law is concerned and its impact on you as a Guyanese but a U.S. citizen, you have to be aware of. Questions? Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Mike McKenzie, XQC, 1976. I noticed on the agenda, probably you had to change your agenda somewhat, but I did notice one important point which we didn't get to cover fully, which was the curse of oil. How does Guyana avoid the curse of oil? And that was my question, because I think that's a very important topic to discuss. Yes. I know that Dr. Blackman discussed the whole idea of equity in terms of as we get more developed and we get more wealth, it's important to look at the equity of the wealth. But how are we going to avoid the curse of oil is my question. What are we doing?
Okay.
You got that clearly?
Yeah, so the question is how do we address the oil curse? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, well, I would say, first of all, there's got to be a strategic vision that Guyana has, whatever the government of the day has. And that strategic vision has to look out way into the future, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and decide what it is the role is going to be of the oil and gas in Guyana, and have a means of getting there, communicate the steps. Now, one of the things that, in my opinion, has to be done as an overarching imperative is develop long-term and intermediate-term economic development plans for new industries, and number two, also improving Guyana's existing industries, your bauxite, rice, livestock, poultry, timber. The other part of avoiding the resource curse that goes into this, I think that the system that's in place in Guyana, where one side takes politically, that does not lend itself to having this sustainability long-term and having a united vision. So in those strategic plans, both the government and major opposition, and really all stakeholders, should have input into the strategic plan and buy into it. That way, if the government changes in not a few years, the country will still be moving along. Much like it does in a country like the United States, there is an energy policy that really doesn't change from administration to administration. It is still the same because there's actually a policy and there's a plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that greatly answered part of the question. I think
yes.
what you're basically saying is that diversification of our industries is key. Don't put all of our eggs in one basket. I think Dr. Blackman also mentioned the fact that we need to be looking at some kind of, I guess, a financial fund, similar to the sovereign fund, for example, that Norway has,
right,
as a means for kind
right,
of safeguarding our future.
But before we get to the sovereign fund,
yes,
the wealth fund, just want to ask, just to step in here, to piggyback on some of the points that you made in responding to Mr. McKenzie. One of them is about the vision. Is there an articulated vision in Guyana for the people of Guyana? Do the people of Guyana know of a vision for the country, for the fruits of this oil and gas industry? Can anyone, do you want to take that just? Well, is there a vision?
I haven't seen a vision per se that says, other than, things are going to get better. I haven't seen a vision that says, this is what we have, this is the opportunity, this is where we are today, this is where we're going to be in 30 years, right? And this is what you're going to see in 30 years. And these are the steps that it will take in order to get there. I haven't seen that. So they're probably working on it, but it hasn't been communicated. As far as I know, I could be out of the loop, but I try to keep in touch with what goes on in Guyana on a daily basis.
Mr. Karimula, you've been on the ground. Is there a vision? Do we know what's going to happen 5 years from now? Is there a plan, any strategy?
Okay. Rosalind, yes. In fact, there are administrations in the United States that are known as the Housing Administration, the Education Administration. What I see in Guyana right now, and maybe the government hasn't formally articulated it, but this is a roads administration. They're opening roads at a breakneck speed. And I've seen tons of acreages of lands that are being opened, right? I'll give you a quick example of some of the things that would address this resource course imperative. And that is the bauxite, during the mining over the years, you have to dig into the hole deep down, and then you take it overburden and you place it up there and you get these hills. Recently, it was announced 6,000 acres or hectares of land is going to be reforested. Again, a major oil and gas company is funding that project because they're going to be buying the carbon credits, right? So roads are key, and the second thing is the single-digit US cents per kilowatt hour for energy. We're paying like 33 cents a kilowatt hour. If you get Trinidad 6 cents, Suriname is like 10 cents. This is why we never had in the manufacturing industries. And this is why also bandwidth. Bandwidth is an issue. ExxonMobil uses more bandwidth from their drill ships and the FPSO onto the shore base than the entire country of Guyana uses. Bandwidth plus bits that are crossing, storage, data storage. So that just gives you an idea of what is coming down the pike. The government hasn't said, oh, we're going to... The government did say, in fact, that they're trying to get the cost of electricity, which is the key. Because think about where it would impact, not only bandwidth, which will then generate a plethora of other industries, because right now in Guyana, we don't have HP, Microsoft, Dell, we don't have those companies. Anytime you want some technical support, you have to go to Trinidad or pick up the phone. I know this because I'm also involved in IT, right? Okay. So that's key, right? Roads and energy cost, stable energy cost.
So those are imperatives. Those are imperatives that we're talking about, but we don't know for sure if those imperatives are in fact being discussed so that the people of Guyana know that they're coming down the pike.
Well, in the media, you have the gas to shore project being talked about, right? And I think, Edwin, you alluded to the natural gas, and so to Dennis, that it's not only oil, but there's also natural gas, right? So once we get that going, and I think they mentioned the date of 2023, right? Because there's a lot of companies that are in the East Bank. They're preparing, they're there soon. If you go into the shelves in Guyana, you're getting things that we can produce and we used to produce. Now they're being produced in Trinidad, Jamaica, Belize, and so on and so forth. Right? And they can supply not only CARICOM, but the tourist industry.
Okay.
Right? So as far as resource costs, they're diversifying. And the key, like I said, is energy, all right? And the roads, because they're opening up settlements all over the place. Right?
Okay.
Well, the housing, yeah, that's the housing.
Yes, once you start doing that. So they're not saying this is how we tackle resource costs. They're basically just doing it. And they're doing it at a breakneck speed.
Yeah, but my concern is, and forgive me, if the people are not aware of what's taking place, how do you get the buy-in that Edwin talked about? How do you get the buy-in of the people so that, yes, if this administration is over and another one comes in, yeah, we can continue that way. If the people of Guyana do not understand, are not told, have no idea of how we're going for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 30 years. I'm not talking about the politicians, but if the people of Guyana don't know what's going on, and then you will have that disconnect that we heard about in your panel, that disconnect. So, okay.
Rosalind, quickly, I know there are other questions coming. Like take, for instance, the Linden-Mabura Road. There are Guyanese here who are rushing down there, right, for the management contract. There are lots of tenders that are in the newspapers every day. This road, that road, the Brazilians are funding this, the hydroelectric, energy projects. There are Guyanese that are going down there. Diasporans who are, you know what else? There are people here I know of who are going down there to build a lot of housing units. Anyway, I just see my time is up.
Yeah. Any other questions? You want to make a point on any of that?
Oh, no more questions.
Questions from the floor? Any? Yes, please identify yourself.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elijah Johnson. I just have a quick question. And my question is, are there any talks to use a portion of the revenue from the oil to fund any green projects or collaborate with other green organizations?
Well, I believe back in 2018 or 19, there was a project of about either 68 or 73 million US dollars that was specifically for solar. I don't know what the status of that is at the moment. It had something to do with Norway providing some of the funds. But yes, there are plans to do green projects.
Anything domestically, like from the Guyanese people, for the Guyanese people, so it doesn't have to be outsourced?
Well, it was domestic in the sense of those solar generators, if you want to call them that, would be located in areas of the country where you do not have ready access to the grid. So, but I think the point that you're asking about is, are local people going to be involved in putting those together and whatnot? And I guess they will, but I can't see why they would not be.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Pelham Van Kooten, and I'm with Guyana Tapestry. I understand the value of what we're doing here. Is there a member of the government, the Guyana government, or stakeholders at home who are responsible for these activities here this evening? And while this brainstorming session is important and lends value to informing the diaspora and perhaps Guyanese at home, is there a feedback loop in place that communicates the discussions we're having here, the ideas that are surfacing and circulating, so that those responsible parties at home would be informed about the concerns in the diaspora and understand the value that can be brought by the conversations that are happening here. Except that happens, I hate to suggest, that much of this is futile.
Yeah.
And we've seen this kind of play out in past scenarios. So that's my question. Thank you.
Understood. Thanks. Anyone from the Queen's College? Yes.
Yes, well, thanks for the question, Pelham. So there is no direct government involvement in this symposium. There are members of the, I guess, representatives of the government, like through the Guyana consulate, who were invited to attend, but I don't think they were able to make it. I do believe, however, I do know, however, that these proceedings are being recorded, and so they will be made available upon request, if they are requested by any members of the government. But this is currently just solely a Queen's College of Guyana Alumni Association event.
Thank you. Any other questions? Wow. Yes.
I actually do have a question. My name is Nola Rodney, and my family owns a very popular Guyanese restaurant in Brooklyn. I'm curious to know if there's anyone from QCAA or any of the panelists who would be interested in having a conversation with our customers in layman's terms, so that the disconnect that we talked about earlier would be translated in a way where regular Guyanese citizens will understand in simpler terms. If there's anyone interested in doing an event, we would love to host you, because we do have a high traffic clientele, and they will be very interested in a piece of the pie, because people are just running around saying we ILE, but what exactly, what exactly does that mean? So if there's anyone interested, my name is Nola Rodney, and I'm sitting right in the back.
You're offering your restaurant as a venue?
Yes.
For all of us to go there and just chat. Talk about
and
it.
Speak to people in a simpler language.
That is essential.
And make it clearer to them how they can actually go from a regular Joe to someone who actually is able to invest.
Thank you for that question. I think it's a very appropriate question, because we can come up here and talk in terms of a bunch of different technical things that for most regular people, even some professionals, it just does like this. And it doesn't further the conversation where it really needs to be furthered, and that is in the masses.